And if you don't know who is our guest has a very, great, interesting Instagram account called Multicultural Motherhood, and she talks a lot about language because she's a speech therapist, and the whole idea tonight was to discuss,
Hello.
language development. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And, language is such an important question. And new parents, young parents, they are all very eager to know how to develop their children language, and quite often worried as well about, is my child language developed properly or not? What should I need to do? Is he supposed to talk already? There are a lot of worries and concern about language development. So it's great to have you, to kind of enlighten us about language. So if you can introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you and what you do and so on, and your family.
Yeah, so I'm Veronica and I'm a speech and language therapist. I live in the southwest of England and I have 4 children and we are a homeschool family. So we're very, very busy every day homeschooling and having fun. And I'm also a blogger at multiculturalmotherhood.com, and I blog
Yeah.
about homeschooling, motherhood and multicultural family life and things like speech, language and bilingualism issues as well.
Good. Yes, and yes, indeed, you are a speech therapist. So for those who have no clue, what a speech therapist exactly is doing, we kind of know that it has something to do with language, but, day to day, what do you do as a speech therapist? And maybe it's a bit different in the UK, in some other countries, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, if you can give us a bit more info about the role of a speech therapist, at least here in the UK, and when do we need to go to a speech therapist with our child?
Well, a speech and language therapist is trained to help people with speech and language issues, and they can be a wide variety of issues. So we work with children and adults. For children, it could be things like speech and language delay, if children cannot say particular speech sounds, if they're not able to talk by the age of 2, then we start to have intervention for children then. Also things like children born with a cleft palate, or children who stutter, have a stammer, we work with those as well. And even with adults, we work a lot with people who've had strokes or have cancer in the throat and have had the voice box removed. There's a really big range of things that speech and language therapists do. And the other thing that we do as well is work with children and adults who have swallowing difficulties, because we are the professionals who are trained in the mouth and throat anatomy. So we often deal with children or adults who have swallowing issues as well.
Okay. Great. And you just mentioned, if a child doesn't speak at 2 years old, then they're going to be referred to a speech therapist. What do we mean by don't speak? It's like not speaking at all, or just a few words, because, there is this explosion of language around 22 months, but, it's not on the dot, I suppose. But what do we mean by already speaking at 2, or, what is the line between, okay, they are developing a language or no language at all?
Yeah, so at the age of 2 here in the UK, the children are seen by the health visitor for their 2-year check. So they will go through all of the checklist of their development, and they will look at the motor skills and their feeding and all kinds of development, and they also check speech and language. So what the warning signs are is if a child is not saying at least 50 words at the age of 2, then they can have a speech and language delay. So around the age of 2, children are supposed to be saying between 50 and 200 words. So if the child is saying less than 50, then that will be a red flag for us, to maybe be involved and help the child. The other thing is at the age of 2, children are normally starting to put 2 words together. So if the child is also not doing this, that's another red flag for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another question that I had for you, like the red flags. And indeed, less than 50 words and not putting two words together around the age of 2. And so when do they
Yeah.
start, basically? Because, if we wait until the age of 2 to be worried, there was probably, some signs earlier, I guess.
Yeah. Well, even right from the beginning, children are able to start babbling probably between the age of 3 to 6 months. You will see children begin to babble, and that's the normal baby language when they're saying ba ba da da, those kind of things. So if they're not babbling, then that's obviously a warning sign right at the beginning. I mean, if they're not babbling at all by about 6 months, I would be worried about that, definitely. And even before that, things like eye contact. Are they making eye contact with you? Babies from birth, they will be drawn to your face and looking in your eyes. So if a child is not doing this, then, that is really something that we need to look at, because, they could be developing they could have something like autism or something if they're not making eye contact. And eye contact and looking at people's faces is really important in order to learn language.
Absolutely, yeah. That's how we start to communicate that way, obviously, and that the baby can, observe the way we talk and, our gestures and our mouth move. So obviously they're not looking at us. They're missing all of that, I guess. So that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, obviously you did say that you blog about multicultural. So can you tell me a bit more why you started to call yourself, multicultural motherhood, and why you wanted to focus on the multicultural aspect of probably your family, and it's important for you? And
actually grew up in a Polish family. My parents are actually Polish, but I was born in the UK, obviously. So quite multicultural there. And now I'm married to a man from Turkey. He's Kurdish, but he comes from Turkey. So he actually speaks 4 different languages. And my parents obviously speak Polish, so we've got a lot of different languages going on there. And a lot of different cultures going on, the Polish culture, the British culture, the Turkish Kurdish culture. So yeah, we're just a complete mix of a lot of different cultures.
That's great. And so do you still speak Polish?
Well, I don't actually speak that much Polish, actually. My parents did not speak Polish to me when I was growing up. And it was really, I think, because people didn't realize how important bilingualism was, 20, 30 years ago. They thought that bilingual children would be at a disadvantage. But now we know that the bilingual advantage is huge. I mean, children are gaining so many amazing cognitive benefits from being bilingual, things like increased attention, increased flexibility. So there's just such an advantage to being bilingual. So I would say to anyone who's thinking about teaching their child another language, definitely go for it, because it will just benefit them so much.
Yeah, I remember reading a study about the brain development in bilingual children, and that the brain development was different. Like, you could see the impact of learning another language in the early years on the neurons pathways, and that was showing that you could still learn other language when you were growing up in the easiest way than someone who hasn't been exposed at all to another language in the early years. So that was quite interesting.
Definitely does help with learning, other languages later on, like at school. If you learn another language when you're young, it will obviously help you when you're older. But even things like going into old age, it even delays like the onset of dementia. So there's a wide variety of advantages that will last, the whole lifespan, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Quite amazing, right? And obviously we are bilingual in our family as well, so that's something that has always interested me, how do we learn a language? And it was very interesting to see how my daughter was learning another language. And she used to kind of translate and telling me, oh, that's how we say it in English, She was telling me that in French. So she was able, at the age of like 3 or 4, to make the connection between the 2 languages. And it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't seem that intuitive. You could see that she was making the work in her head about like the structure of the sentences in French and in English, and questioning, the differences between the two languages and what was similar, and the ways that we were putting, adjective after the word or before the word in both languages. And she was quite young, so, and she's still very good in both languages, and she has a very good, very, very good level of English. You couldn't see that she's not, it was not a mother tongue. And on the other hand, I felt that I talked as much French with my son, but he didn't pick up on the French as much. And obviously because
Is he younger?
yes, and so between the two of them, they were talking English a lot. So it's a bit,
Yes, I mean it's quite common. The
yeah.
younger children do tend to know the minority language less, and it is because of that. Is because the older siblings obviously can talk English to them,
Yeah.
so they're hearing less the minority language at home, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And I think as well, in our case, when we had our daughter, I had arrived in Ireland. I was in Ireland for a year, so my own level of English was not as good, and I was not as integrated, in at the time in the Irish neighborhood. So basically, I was more with French people, so she was more exposed. And when I had my son, I was more and more with local people and talking in English all the time. And even with my husband, we talk English to each other while we are both French. So I do know that he has been less exposed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a question as well. How do we, when we are in a bilingual family, like in your case, is it the rule, one parent, one language, then a common language? What is the best way to nurture, both languages, or maybe even a third languages? What is the best way to do that? Because that's really a common question.
Well, yeah, one parent, one language is a really good thing to do. I mean, if both parents speak obviously different languages, then you can do that. But also, if both parents speak the minority language, I would say both of you just speak the minority language at home, because the children will always learn the majority language. It's impossible for them not to learn the language of the country that they live.
No.
So if you're worried about your child not picking up English if you live in England, don't worry about it. Even if both parents speak a different language at home, the children will definitely pick up English, when they go to school and things. And children are so good at learning languages at that young age that they'll pick it up so quickly. Mm-hmm. The other things that you can do are things like talking the language on a certain day of the week, or the other things are maybe talking at different times of the day. So for example, when you have meal times, you could say, right, this is the time we're going to talk in French, the rest of the day. So yeah, you could have it certain times of the day. You could say in the mornings we're going to talk English, in the afternoons we're going to talk French, or meal times we're going to talk French, or any time that's suitable for you, really. You can just pick what suits your family.
And another question that maybe more a personal question, because I know it's a case in our family, but what if, like in your case, my youngest kind of refuse to answer to us in French. He understands, and if I speak French, unless he doesn't want to listen to what I'm saying, because it's specifically about me asking him to tidy up his bedroom in French, so he's going to ignore that thing. But when they refuse, to speak the minority language, and obviously answer constantly in the main language, in English, and still understand. So do we just let them answer? Do we kind of encourage them to respond in French? So I don't know what is the best way to do that, to be honest.
Well, as long as they've got that understanding, that's the main thing, really, because it means that they still know the language.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to obviously pick it up again later if they do want to. It is a common problem when children are, quite young, because they start to realize that the majority language, so English in our case, is the language of power, it's the language of the society. So they realize that that's the most important language for them to know, which is why they start to stop speaking the minority language. But you know, I have a friend, for example, who is Italian, and if her children do not respond back to her in Italian, she'll just say to them in Italian, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And she'll keep saying, I don't understand, until they actually say the same thing again in Italian. So, you know, that's one thing that you could try if you're really keen to get your child talking the minority language. The other thing I would say is try and spend as much time as you can with other people who speak the minority language. You know, so if you have any friends or family, get together with them. If there's any
kind of theme.
if there's any mother and baby groups around, you know, I know there's lots of bilingual mother and baby groups around these days, or if there's a language school, you know, like a Saturday school where the people learn French, definitely try and get your children involved in that, because, you know, the more they realize that other people are speaking the minority language, the more they realize that it's useful and it's going to be beneficial to them.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, in our case, you know, I'm taking my case because it's easier. What we do is like to, when we have my family around, obviously, because none of them speak English, then very quickly, you know, after one day, my son picks up and starts to speak. And we have seen a big difference. Like the last time my family came, he was able to speak much more than usual. So I do believe it's there. It's just
yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as they've got the understanding, that's the main thing. I mean, if they stopped understanding, then that would be a problem, because they would be losing the language then. But if they've got the understanding, that's really the main thing. And it's just really important to keep speaking to them in the minority language, even if they don't answer back, even if they answer back in English. Just keep speaking French to them, and you know, maintain that level of understanding. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think as you said, yes, it's not that much as we force them, but they have the opportunity to speak, you know, as much as possible. Yes. So another question that we had from one of the member of the group is a specific one about grommets, and but her daughter is going to get grommets placed. So until now, you know, obviously she had a hearing issue, and she's wondering if she's going to pick up and how she can help her daughter to pick up quickly now that she's going to have the grommets placed in. So it's a very specific question, but I think that's quite common anyway to be treated for.
Glue ear is extremely common. In fact, a GP told me once that every child has had glue ear at some point. You know, it's very common. You know, because when they have a cold, the young children, they get fluid in their ear, and that fluid then doesn't drain away properly, and that is what causes glue ear. But you know, it can cause speech and language difficulties if they're not hearing properly. And the thing with glue ear, it's quite interesting because it's caused by the fluid in the ear. So you may think that it will just affect their hearing, as in they won't be able to hear properly. But actually, sometimes they can even hear too loud. So it can change depending on where the fluid is in the ear. Sometimes they won't be able to hear very well, and other times they'll be able to hear too loud, and they might be complaining about noises and saying, oh, that's too loud, that's hurting my ears. So that's quite important to realise. But I actually did have glue ear when I was younger as well. And it was only picked up when I started school, and I was having trouble hearing the teacher in the classroom then. But it didn't affect my speech. I must have developed it after the initial language acquisition took place. And also my youngest brother had it as well, and he was a late talker. He did not talk at all until he had grommets, and that was done at about the age of 2.5, which is the youngest that they do tend to do the operation. And he actually started speaking very, very quickly after he had the operation, because, you know, as soon as he had it done, he could just hear, and the language acquisition just came. So yeah, I would say don't worry about it. As soon as your child can hear, you know, they're going to be picking up on stuff. But, you know, the things that you can do are just make sure that you're speaking to them in really simple sentences until they've got a certain level of communication. So make sure also, it's really, really important actually to make sure there's not much background noise, because the background noise can affect the hearing and it can stop them tuning into language. So, you know, when you're interacting with your child, firstly, just make sure you've got the TV off, radio off, and try and make the environment as quiet as possible so they can really just tune into what you're saying. And then, you know, just interact with them as much as possible. listen to them. It's really, really important when children are starting to talk that you listen and respond to them. That's even sometimes more important than what you say to them. You know, the fact that when they say an utterance, you're saying something back to them, and it makes them realize that communication is really important. It's something that they should be doing. And, you know, you can do things like the running commentary. Talk to them about what you're doing all the time. You know, if you're making their breakfast, you can be like, I'm getting out the bowl, I'm pouring the cereal into the bowl, I'm pouring the milk into the bowl, here's your breakfast, here's your spoon, eat the breakfast. You know, just everything you're doing. When you're getting them dressed, you know, we'll put your right leg in the right trouser leg hole, and, you know, we're putting the vest on top of your head and things like this. You can just be talking about everything that you're doing, and that's going to be really important. What really is important is to say what you see. So whatever you and your child are seeing in the environment, talk about that. When children are first starting to talk, there's really not much point in talking about the past or what's going to happen in the future, because those things are not concrete. Your child is not seeing that. So first of all, you just need to be talking about what you see, what is in the environment, what you're looking at, what they're looking at. And as their language acquisition gets a bit better, as they get older, you can then start to talk more about past and future events.
Okay, that's interesting. And it's really just to help them to pick up as quickly as possible, know that the child has the grammar in place.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be a problem. You know, as soon as they're hearing better, I think the language will just come really quickly.
That's great. And in general, you know, what can parents do, you know, just to nurture their child's language?
So yeah, just what I've been saying really about, you know, saying what you see, doing the running commentary. Also give them a lot of choices. You know, if it's snack time, for example, and you can offer them a choice of what snack they want. Do you want an apple or do you want an orange? You know, and it's really important to get the things that you're talking about, and, you know, put it close to your mouth when you're saying it. You know, do you want the apple or do you want the orange? So they're looking at your mouth when you're saying the words. And, you know, even if they're just reaching out, even if they're not saying the word, you know that they've got that understanding standing there, because, you know, they're picking what they want. So you can do that with anything really. Games that you want to play, or, you know, maybe even give them a choice of clothes that they want to wear. You know, just give them choices. That's a really good way to get them involved in language and talking to you. And the other thing is, when they start to say their first words, when they've got that one word level, you can then start to try and expand on their utterances. So, you know, if they're pushing along a car, say, car's driving, or the blue car, you've got the blue car. You know, so you can always just see, you know, respond to what they're saying by just giving them that little bit more information about it. Just expand on their utterances, and that will help them to grow their vocabulary.
Yeah, so basically when the child starts to say car, you add a little bit on that. You say that's the red car. And then that's what you meant. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very
Or
good.
verbs, you know, cars driving.
Yeah.
You know, cars crashing in the wall.
Yeah, I think I feel that we do that naturally, but obviously maybe not, you know. We can be, I think as parents, we can be a very quiet person before we have our children, so it might feel a bit odd to talk to a child who doesn't yet talk back, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we are, you know, a new mom at home. I do remember, you know, that I was chatting to my child, but I remember that the house was much more lively when I had two, because they were talking together. So that I was always talking because I had a 4-year-old in the house, compared to when I had, you know, my first child, who was less than a year old. She was a very good talker, but I remember the difference, you know, when they started to talk and, you know, the house become very, you know, noisy all of a sudden. So I think there can be a time when we are first-time mom, when we don't really realize the importance of talking back to a child.
Absolutely. I mean, you will just feel stupid at first, I think. Sometimes, you know, you just, you know, because it's like you're talking to yourself. A newborn baby can't respond to you that much, really. So, but, you know, don't worry about feeling stupid. It's really, really important just, you know, to expose your child to as much language as you can, because the more language they're exposed to, you know, the better that they're going to be able to learn, the quicker, the greater their vocabulary is going to be. It's really, really important. And there's been a study actually about the vocabulary gap. You know, it's been found that by the age of 3, there's a 30 million word vocabulary gap between those of high socioeconomic status and those of low socioeconomic status. So, you know, between the, you know, more well-off families and the lower class families. And it's just, you know, it's crazy really to think 30 million words less those children are hearing by the age of 3. I mean, 30 million is just such a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. How many, what is like the kind of number of words that we, in general, you know, on average, as a human being, or do we say, there is a number, right? And we say that the children...
Yeah, well, an adult vocabulary is about 50,000 words. So, I mean, that's their speaking vocabulary. You may understand double that, you know. So obviously, you know, when we're speaking, we don't use as many words, but when we're reading, we could, you know, we understand words that we wouldn't necessarily say in our everyday speech. So yeah, 50,000 is the spoken vocabulary of an adult, and 100,000, up to 100,000 is the understanding.
When does a child reach that level? What do we expect after 6 years? Because 6 years, you know, the first 6 years is like the main language development is kind of done. So
well, they'll be understanding thousands of words by the time they're 6. I mean, at the age of 3, they should be understanding, you know, about 5,000 maybe. Yeah. Lots. I mean, children are understanding lots. I mean, at the age of 3, they can say over 1,000 words. So, you know their understanding is going to be a couple of thousand more than that.
Well, that's impressive because we don't really think in terms of big numbers like that. And obviously, I'm sure nobody is like counting the number of words the children understand. And I cannot really comprehend that it's that many words. I do know the numbers some way, but I just cannot remember, you know, I couldn't say the 2,000 words that my children knew at the age of 3, if you know what I mean.
Well, we don't really think about it. I mean, I mean, you probably stopped counting after the first 50 or something anyway. You know? I mean, I don't even like listen to my children and count how many words that they know. You know what I mean? So yeah, people just don't generally do it. Obviously, they do it for these studies because you know they're trying to find out something. But it's not generally something that we think about that much.
No, and obviously, what helps with language is reading and books, obviously, I guess. So do you have any tips about that? You know, when to read, what books to choose? Any general tips about?
Well, obviously, you can be reading to your child from birth. I mean, anything that you say to your child is just going to be brilliant. And if you get them used to picture books really early on, it's going to give them a love of books, a love of reading. And the books that you should choose for a newborn or for young babies, you don't even have to read the words on the page. You can just be looking at the pictures and pointing things out. That's really, really important. Even up to about 12, 18 months, you can just be doing that. You know, it's really important to just point to what you see on the page and name it for them. As they get a little bit older, you can then ask them, you know, where's the flower? Where's the rabbit? You know, and get them to point things out to you. And then you can be testing their understanding as well. And then as they get a little bit older, obviously you can start to read the words as well, and they'll really enjoy it, particularly rhyming books. I think rhyming books are really, really important for to learn phonological awareness and, you know, how words, it's really great for learning to read as well. But, you know, you don't really need to teach a child to learn to read until much, much older. I think they learn a bit too young in this country, to be honest, because the school age is really quite young. But yeah, books are just brilliant. You should just read as much as possible, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, one of the reasons I asked you to come and chat, it's also because you're offering a course about language development for parents of very young children. I think it's more for birth to 3, right? And so, yeah, if you can give us a bit more information about that, like that, those who are watching can go and check.
Yeah, so the course that I am running is called Raising Talkers, how to help your child to talk. And it's really for parents of babies and young children, sort of 0 to 3, and even for people who are pregnant as well and expecting a baby. Because I really believe that this information should be available to people before they have a baby. It's really important because, you know, language development is actually beginning inside the womb. You know, babies are able to hear inside the womb. So that's when the start of their language development happens. And, you know, as they get older, it's just really important to be able to know how to interact with them, because parents, how they interact with children, it's the strongest predictor of their language skills. So it's really important to be aware of the best ways to interact with your child to be able to bring on their language development. I mean, language delay is actually increasing. So language delay is actually increasing a lot at the moment, and it's about 15 to 20% of children who are starting school now with a language delay, and this is affecting, you know, everything. It's affecting their ability to read and therefore their ability to learn, and it also affects their life chances and their school achievements later on. It doesn't just affect their ability to read, it even affects their ability to do maths, because you know, everything is about language.
Absolutely,
You know, maths might be numbers, but at the end of the day, it's still language. You know, we're not going to be able to think about doing sums if we don't have those language skills. So my course really, it aims to prevent speech and language delay, and anyone can do it. Any parent can learn to talk to their children better. I mean, just in my own case, my eldest, I actually had her when I was in my second year of university, so I wasn't qualified yet. And her speech and language skills were a lot lower than my other 3 children who were born after I qualified. So, for example, at the age of 18 months, she was only saying about 6 words. Whereas I've got an 18-month-old now, and she's well on her way to getting 50 or more words, and she's started to put 2 and 3 words together already. And it's simply just because I know the best way to interact with her. I know the ways to develop her language skills to the best of her ability. And I just want to share my knowledge with other people and help them to help their child to talk. It may also be useful for parents who have late talkers as well. So if they're 2 years old, they're not saying at least 50 words yet, or 3 years old, or even 4 years old. If they are a late talker, I think this course will be beneficial as well, because it will help the parents to understand the best ways to interact with their children and to help to develop their language skills.
Good. Well, I will make sure to put all the links for everybody and remind everybody where to find this information. And you just mentioned that you see the delay, the language delay increasing. Not you see, but there are most studies showing that. Is it linked to the screen use, to the fact that we use more mobile phones, that we parents, you know, are maybe a bit more disconnected, you know? And
yeah, absolutely, it is, because you know, parents, the screens are stopping parents from interacting with their children.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, studies have found that parents are not interacting as much with their children because there's a screen there. And the other thing is, children do not pick up language from a screen. You know, young children, they are not able to pick up any language from a screen until they're about the age of 2 or 3, I would say. So if you think that you're just going to stick your child in front of the TV and they're going to learn to talk, you're completely wrong, because it just won't happen. Children need to learn language in context. They need to learn it through social interaction, and that is not there when children are watching a screen.
Absolutely, and they need it's an active learning. For whatever a child learn, it must be active, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And as you said, through interactions. And yeah, we are a bit all guilty to be too much on our screen, right? And there is this experiment that you're probably familiar with, that is called the still face experiment. When you see the parents not reacting to whatever the child is doing, and as that still face, and we see the child the baby becoming very upset quickly because the mother is not reacting. And now they've compared that still face experiment to the face we have when we are, you know, scrolling a screen. Even if we say something to a child while we are on the screen, we still have this kind of really absent gaze and still face. And obviously that's very distressing for a child. And that's something that I keep saying to parents, like, when parents said, well, yeah, it's kind of becoming clingy or on my legs when I'm on the phone, even if it's something important and so on. And it's because really the child, a very young child, will have the feeling that you're not there anymore. So they need to make sure you're there, so they come and poke you. Yeah, so I don't know if you were
Yeah.
familiar with that one. So yeah, I think that's a good reminder when we see that experiment that's about what our child might be feeling, and a good wake-up call about, okay, I need to put away the phone, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not easy, okay? It's like this modern society is not easy for parents, I think. I don't,
It's not easy,
yeah,
especially for like people like us who have a blog and have
yeah.
our business online. It's very, very difficult, I know.
Yeah, well, when we use the social media for business, we kind of understand, that it has to be done. But when it's just to, not even to learn something, just to scroll a feed, just to see what the others are doing, it's distracting, obviously. And we need to be more mindful of that because, when we are at home with our children, it's like they are the most important things that we need to pay attention to. But yeah, we're also very isolated as parents. I don't know how you live your life, but I kind of see that many parents are very isolated, and so being connected on social media is a way for us to be with others. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's bad in that way as well, because I think it's stopping people socializing,
Yeah.
because they think, oh, I don't need to go out and meet with friends because I can just chat to them on WhatsApp or whatever. So yeah, I think it's bad for social interaction overall, children and adults. Yeah.
But indeed, being more aware that, knowing that there is a proof that children have more language delay, that we're seeing that now, that we have kind of a scientific proof and studies that have been conducted. So that's kind of a wake-up call as well, I suppose, for parents. And, not to make anyone feeling guilty, because we are currently on our phone, but obviously children are asleep right now, normally. But yeah, we need to find a balance, absolutely. We need to find a balance.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And it can be very, very difficult, I know. But, it's really important just to do what you can and to make changes if you think you are spending too much time on the screen or if you think your children are. I mean, especially before the age of about 18 months, children don't need to watch TV at all. They're not getting
Yeah.
anything out of it. They're not even particularly interested in it. I can say from my own experience, because my older children do watch TV, and the youngest one, who's 18 months, she cannot really sit there and watch something. She's not particularly interested in it. So yeah, it's just really important to have those proper social interactions with your child as much as you can, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just check if anyone was watching, because we have a lot of watchers. I don't know what we say. We don't say watchers. It doesn't make that much sense. But if you have any questions, just ask your questions right now to Veronica, and she will be able to answer. Or when you watch this as a replay, obviously, I'm going to transfer the questions if that's very, relevant for Veronica to maybe give me some pointer where to find the answers. And I will also add all the link for that course, because it's a very interesting course, and I think an important one, especially if you're concerned about language, or if you have no clue what to do and you want to improve that area, obviously, of your parenting. That could be a
I
very
think it's
interesting
just so
one.
important, and people don't really understand the importance of early language skills, because I think people just think, oh, we're just developing it naturally. Nobody
Yeah.
really thinks about it that much. But it is really, really important if you want to, give your child the best start in life, really. And let me just explain a bit more about the course. So it is
Absolutely, yeah.
run on Facebook. It's in a Facebook group, and it's over 4 weeks. And each week there will be a video and a workbook to look through, and also live Q&A. So if you have any questions about the subject that we've been covering, or anything about your child's speech and language development, then you can ask me and I'll do a live Q&A each week as well. So the first week will cover normal speech and language development. The second week will cover abnormal, atypical speech and language development, so things like speech and language delay, stuttering, autism, things like that, and some of the causes for it. And then the final 2 weeks will be me giving you lots of tips and strategies and advice about the best ways to communicate with your children, and just guiding you through, 2 weeks, helping you to improve those interactions with your children.
Great. Brilliant. And when does it start? You didn't tell me, yeah?
Yeah, it starts next Thursday, 11th
All
of
right.
April. Yeah.
Good. Good. So it starts next Thursday. So if you want to join in, that must be done like quite quickly. And so I will add the link. If you want to follow Weronika, I know that many of you following her already because you were quite excited that she was coming here. You go on Instagram and go on Multicultural Motherhood. I don't think you have a Facebook page, or maybe you do.
I do have a Facebook page, though I'm a lot more active on Instagram. I post on my stories all day and on my grid every day. So if you want to see what we're getting up to, especially with homeschooling and things, then just follow my stories, because I post a lot of about the things that I'm getting up to with the kids over on there.
Yeah, because basically you're doing this course while homeschooling 4 children, and the youngest one is 18 months, so you're quite busy for sure.
Yeah, definitely busy, always busy.
Yes, you're not planning to go back and work as a speech therapist, though. It's not in the cards.
No, I don't think it really fits in with my homeschooling lifestyle at the moment. Yeah, I'm just moving more towards doing online courses for parents, and after this one, I'm planning to do one to help parents of children with speech sound difficulties. So, if they struggle saying like a sound, or they got lisp. So that's what I'm planning to do for my next course. And I have other courses that will be coming up. I've got one about bilingualism coming up as well.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah, because that's my specialism. So I'm definitely going to be doing one about bilingualism. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will keep an eye on that one, because that's really something that interested me so much. And I think, I researched into it, but it's always better to have somebody, really specialized into that. I train as a psychologist, and I remember, I trained along the speech therapist, so we had a lot of course in common. So yeah, language has been a big part of my training, but not the kind of practical aspect of it at all. So yeah, very interesting. So thank you so much for being here tonight, for sharing all those valuable information. That was very interesting, and I will make sure I post all the links for everybody to, find you and find you course. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, and I apologize for all the technical issue. I will try to do better next time, but sometimes it's like that, right?
Yeah, technology. You can never tell what's going to happen.
No. Okay, so thank you so much. And well, I will definitely keep chatting with you on Instagram and following you. Okay, bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Yes, bye.